No Cap Fund presents The Representation Station. All right, welcome back. It's The Representation Station, and I am your host, Jeff Mayhew. I am here with the Representation Station crew, Walter Clapp and Roger Scott, and we have a very special guest tonight. But before we get to her, let's do a couple introductions. Walter, why don't you start us off tonight?
Hey everyone, I'm Walter Clapp. I am the president of the No Cap Fund. You can check us out there, y435.org. I'm a lawyer from Texas originally. I live in Laramie, Wyoming, and I am focused on all things representation. You know, how lawyers represent clients, doctors represent clients, and how our elected representatives should be representing their clients, you and I. All right, over to Roger.
Hello, I'm Roger Scott. I'm in North Carolina. I'm a CPA. I'm the resident curmudgeon of the group. And I, too, am all about representation. As a CPA, I represent clients. And I'm pretty unhappy with the representation that all of American citizens have, specifically mine, but it's true of everyone.
All right, and like I mentioned, we have a very special guest on the show, Lura Forcum from We Made This Political, right? I'm saying that wrong, or
Yes.
I got it right? Okay.
I've got my mug.
Yes, because everything is political nowadays, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So-
Yeah, so that was our tongue-in-cheek name for the podcast, which I do with my lovely colleague Lauren Hall, who is a political scientist. And I am a consumer psychologist by training. I was a marketing professor for 7 years, but now I work on the issue of representation from a slightly different vantage point. So my interest is in getting nonpartisan voters to participate politically. These are people who say that they're independents. But yes, exactly same. More and more of us, and they tend to be discouraged from political participation either through the rhetoric or through laws in certain states. And we at the Independent Center, we believe it's really important for them to participate, for them to be represented in our political system. And so we work to educate and inform them and do research on them. And I'm
Awesome.
very excited to talk with you guys tonight.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So let me introduce myself real quick. My name is Jeff Mayhew, as I mentioned before. I am a father of 5. Just a regular guy. My dad's a mechanic. My mom's a banker. I have a small business. And one day I stumbled across this representation problem that we're having by reading history books. I became really dedicated, decided to get involved and do something because as I see it, it's our country and it's our responsibility to speak up for ourselves. If we want representation, if we want better representation, then average people like me and probably you watching need to get out, get involved, and speak up for it. So that's why I'm here. Laura, we met through Josh Lewis from the
Mhm.
Savings Elephants podcast, and we've had a lot of different people on this show, and it seems to be a reoccurring theme that my story is similar to your story, which is similar to Josh's story, which was similar to Ben Colony's story, which was similar to Andy Tippett's story. Regular people getting involved, trying to have a voice because they have no voice, right?
Mhm.
So when we met before, we did a live stream together with Josh on the kids aren't alt right or are alt
Mhm.
right. It was basically on radicalization, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit
That's
on the show.
topical.
Yeah. So perfect timing to have Laura on the show tonight, considering our topics. We're going to go through them. We're going to talk about the show Death by Lightning. We're going to relate it to a few of the news stories going on. One of them being Maria Gluesenkamp Perez, and her standing up to machine politics. Jared Golden retiring or not seeking re-election. And Tucker Carlson put out a special about the kid who tried to assassinate Donald Trump. We're going to talk about that. And then in the next segment, we're going to talk about Ben Shapiro and his solution for the Mandami problem, I think. And at the end, as stated in our bylaws by Walter Clapp, we have to mention something about AI. So there was a 60 Minutes piece about it this weekend that we're going to get into. And before we get into everything, did you guys see the Reagan Caucus podcast this week? Because whoever they had on there was like, he was on point. What do you guys think? Did you guys watch it?
I did, and I thought you did a great job, Jeff. Pat
It's
him
the
on
best
the back.
episode ever.
Everyone
Should've
should go
known.
listen
Rated
to it. He
episode
did a
ever.
very eloquent job defending the positions quite succinctly. I think he did it in 30 minutes. So good job. Everyone go check it out.
Yes, please go take it out. So on the Reagan Caucus, we've had Thomas Howes on. Actually, we had Thomas Howes on before we switched to the podcast. We had him on when we were doing the live streams, and he started the Reagan Caucus, I don't know, a couple years ago now. I had the privilege of being on his podcast, and I got to follow. They had, in successive weeks, they had Jonah Goldberg, David French, and Don Bacon on the
Wow.
show. And I'm like, and then they asked me to be on the show, and I go, have you guys lost your mind? Like, you guys are killing your momentum here. So my goal is, and if you could help us out there, I would really appreciate this. Let's get up to the views that the Jonah Goldberg episode has, because that's the leading one in the house in the stable right now. He has 4,000 views on the Jonah Goldberg episode. There's 1,600 views on the David French episode. There's 350 something on the Don Bacon episode, and then my episode is now up to 80. All right, let's get it way closer to Jonah Goldberg. Maybe we could get a retweet. Maybe we could get a share. Maybe we can get an invite to the Remnant. I don't know, but just help us out. Let's get this talked about. Listen to the arguments, quote whatever you think is relevant, argue with me on Twitter. I don't care. Just talk about representation. Let's get this thing, as Walter says, we have a moral imperative to go viral. And
That's right.
So let's get this started. All right. Now that I'm done promoting myself. You guys all watch the Death by Lightning show?
Yes.
All right. So incredibly relevant considering what's going on. So first topic we're going to talk about tonight is Maria Gluesenkamp-Perez is standing up to her party, saying the ploy by Rep. Garcia to end his reelection at the last second and plant his chief of staff as the only candidate to succeed him is, quote, undermining the process of a free and fair election, and that his actions are, quote, beneath the dignity of his office and incompatible with the spirit of the Constitution. Now, why this is relevant is because this is what James Garfield was doing in the show. Right. And in episode 3, you really get to see this where he's taking on he's trying to get his nominees passed through the Senate. And the number one nominee that they're really fighting over is the collector of the Port of New York. That's where like 90% of all federal revenue flowed through. And Chester A. Arthur, who's now his vice president, happened to be the former collector. And he was, let's just say, a little corrupt. And he worked for.
He was a little handsy.
Well, I don't know how accurate everything in the show was, by the way, but
Okay.
You're on mute.
Who? Is Roger
Me.
trying to talk?
Yeah, corrupt and conflicted. Right?
Yes.
He's corrupt at the beginning. As Offerman plays him, he's wrestling during the course of the thing. But he's corrupt and conflicted. Is the most entertaining character of the whole show, apart from the buffoonery that he does.
Right. And so, as I mentioned on the last show, Chester A. Arthur is part of Roscoe Conkling's crew. Roscoe Conkling is a senator from New York. He's the one that doles out patronage and pork. That's what government runs on. And it is good or it's bad. If you look at it in the situation post the Civil War, because they mentioned that in the show, that's how we got things done. That's what Lincoln did. He doled out jobs and deals. And sometimes it works well when you're dealing them out to the right people. And when you're using it for political power, it never really ends well. And that's what's happened in the show. So I found it incredibly relevant. I'm just curious, A, what do you guys think about the show in that aspect of that? And then B, what about Gluesenkamp-Perez standing up to her party? I mean, I think this is a big deal. Laura, I'm going to let you go first since you're our guest.
Well, so I was not familiar with this show before you shared it with me, and everybody I mentioned it to was like, "Oh yeah, that's a great show." So I might have to add this to my watch rotation, which is very thin, I have to admit. Um, but it was really it was gritty, I guess. And I agree with your point that even right now, a lot of politics runs through patronage systems, and I don't know how much the average voter is aware of that, is aware of how things actually get done in Washington, either with lobbying or think tanks, all these different sort of institutions that have their own ecosystem. And I've found Marie Gluesenkamp Perez to just be a really principled person. I've been really impressed by her, and so I'm not surprised to see her drawing this line. I think this is the kind of behavior we would want to see from elected officials of any party, which is to say, I want good, effective governance, not policies that prefer my own party, right? Like I want to adhere to principles and norms and ethics because that's the expectation, not because a shortcut will benefit me.
Yeah, so I there was a interview that she did with Jake Tapper, and Jake Tapper kind of just asked her like, "Why are you doing this?" And she was it was
Hmm.
it was kind of funny her response for based on what you just said there is like because I believe that subverting an election regardless of party is bad. Like
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, but like and it's so refreshing but rare to hear in politics today because normally what you get is the partisan answer and
Hmm.
I think I agree with you. She's one of my favorite Congress people out there.
Hmm.
And I consider myself a Republican. I could care less about party. I care about somebody actually doing what their voters want, what's best for the country, and I really do think that she is doing that. Walter, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Yeah, just to give the listeners a little bit more color in case they're not familiar. So, Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, in particular, what she was doing is calling out Representative Jesus Chuy Garcia. It's an Illinois seat for the Democrats, and I guess it's a kind of patronage deal. I don't know. He's trying to handpick whoever comes next. Basically, is that what she's calling out in particular, Jeff?
Yeah, so he's decided to retire, kind of last minute. I think there's a lot of circumstances in his life that justify his retiring, but I think the
Okay.
point here is he held on to the seat to retiring until the last minute so his chief of staff would be the only representative running. It's a gerrymandered district for the Democrats, which means she's not really going to have any competition. So it's very similar in the aspect of the what Conkling was doing in the show. Conkling controlled all the nominees. He was fighting with Garfield.
Mm,
Garfield was like, "You shouldn't be allowed to pick all these nominees. That's my job. The Senate's just supposed to confirm them. And plus, you're picking the people that you want for your reason. It's machine
yeah.
politics
Yeah.
over top of country." But go ahead.
Hmm.
No, yeah. I mean, I think it is. There's no doubt that our principles have to reemerge. I think as a country, in order to get out of the trap that we're currently in, and that's why I go back to uncapping the house, because I think it is what will kind of create that resurgence of a sense of civic duty, but also with as much technology as we have today, it would be or should be relatively easy to keep pretty close tabs on what your representative is doing and whether or not they're shady, right? Like we've got the tech, we can figure this out. So I think that there's hope to get beyond. I think the machine, the party politics. At least a little bit. At least have it balanced out by genuine representation of the people's interests, and a bottom up sourcing of solving problems. Right, which is what Americans are great at. We're great at identifying problems, solving problems. So put the people to work to help solve some of the problems of our government. Right, and and it's when you have this cronyism, it's so inefficient because the best person is not getting picked for the job. That's for sure, right? I mean, it's incompetence, and that's, I think one of the criticisms levied against the current administration, which I think there's some truth to it, especially because a lot of the talent just didn't want to work for him, and then he also drives people away. That there there maybe is a little bit less talent in the current administration, and you know, uh, we I think we could see tremendous talent, a tremendous amount of knowledge come into an uncapped house, be it from the executive branch, bureaucracy, or just people who want to get the job done. But I think that it's a real possibility, and it would really counterbalance the patronage and the corruption that we've seen coming from the current administration. And it would be a way for him to repent, right? I keep holding out hope. I think Trump's going to repent before he's out of here. So I dribbled on. Back to
So
y'all.
you reminded me of a great scene in the show where Garfield is basically listing his nominees down, and he hands them over to his I can't remember what position he was, but James G. Blaine is there, uh,
Secretary of State
Secretary of State. That's
and
what I thought.
and sort of
Yeah.
mentor, right hand
Right.
facilitator.
Yeah.
And so he hands him over to James G. Blaine, and Blaine looks at him and he's like, "These are fantastic, but they're a fantasy. Like, none of these guys are going to get confirmed. They're all the best people for the job." Like, so you mentioned like
Uh-huh.
we don't have
Yeah.
the patronage. And it's a duality, right? Like the patronage allows you the possibility of hiring the best people for the job. However, more often than not, it actually, especially when you're in a corrupt political time like they were in the 1880s, and when you're in a corrupt political time like we are now, you typically end up getting the worst people for the job. And that's that was the issue with the port of New York they were skimming all the money off the top. They were stealing from
Mhm.
the federal revenue. But I'll go up to Roger now.
Oh, yeah. I can offer no support. There's no good reason to do what Garcia did. That district is 67.5%. He won with 67.5% of the vote in his last election. But the tricky thing is he waited till after the deadline to resign, but he tipped off his chief of staff before the deadline so she could file. Now she's the only one filed, so nobody else can run for that seat. So it's a dirty trick, and it shouldn't happen. I certainly can't support it. Uh, there's a reason, that getting to the show that we've been watching and the history that it depicts, right? We used to have a lot of that stuff going on in this country, and there's a reason why we moved away from it. Right.
Mhm.
I can't see any good reason to go back to it at this point. And yeah, I support Glusenkamp Perez standing up against anyone and displaying integrity in public office.
Yeah, I would like to point out also, because it hasn't been mentioned yet, but Maria Gluesenkamp Perez is part of an electoral subcommittee or for election reform, or a subcommittee on election reform, and part of their docket that they're looking into is expanding the House of Representatives. So
Hmm.
she is not just a principled leader standing up to machine politics, but she's also a thoughtful political theorist trying to fix the substantial flaw that we have in our government. So, bravo if you're listening out there, very much appreciated. Keep up the good work. Um,
Well,
Isn't
we'll see if
isn't
the bill
she on
coming out
that
of there
committee
does
with
any better.
Golden?
she is. I was gonna connect it to our next segment. Yes, she
Okay.
is on the committee. She was on the committee with Golden. Golden is
Yeah, because
leaving.
he's retiring.
He is not seeking reelection.
What
Yeah.
and do we know why?
Well, yeah, we'll talk about it when we get to the
Okay.
next
All
part.
right.
So was there any like as far as machine politics, was there anything in the show that really stood out to you guys? You know, about this that connects to what we're talking about here before we move on.
Oh, well, one of the things I was just thinking about what we were talking about Marie Gluesenkamp Perez is that what we're talking about here is her kind of like having a boundary for her own party of what is appropriate behavior and what is not. And I think, people think a lot about boundaries for the other party, right? So like everybody has their red lines of when will the opposite party have gone too far? What is too much for a president of the opposite party to do? Nobody thinks in terms of boundaries for their own side. And there's lots of psychological reasons for this. This is in group and out group behavior that's like very deeply wired. But, we need more elected officials who apply those boundaries regardless of party. So the fact that she would be willing to go against her own party, and it's fascinating that, I'm sure the pushback she's getting from within the Democratic Party is tremendous. But we need more people who will hold that line and say, no, it's, this is not a standard that goes away just because my side would benefit from it.
Yeah, and you bring up an excellent point that I failed to mention. I think is Garfield is going against his own party here in the show,
Mm.
right? He's not going against the Democrats in Congress. He's going against a rival faction within his own party. There's the Stalwarts, which is run by Roscoe Conkling, and there's the Half-Breeds, which James Garfield is a part of. And the Half-Breeds are, it's not that they don't use patronage as I mentioned before, but they're trying to use it a little bit more fairly than what Conkling and the Stalwarts are doing. So, and what happens in the show is the Stalwarts during this fight over the collector, the Stalwarts really trash James Garfield in the press. Roscoe Conkling, Chester A. Arthur, and there's this guy, this lunatic guy who's kind of he wants power, he wants attention, he wants to make a name for himself. He's a he's a loner. He didn't have a good relationship with his father. He's got a sister that, his brother-in-law doesn't really like, and he thinks he's going to help James Garfield become president. He's not really brought into the fray. He kind of befriends Chester A. Arthur, although I think that it's the show depicts a much more deep connection than I think that they actually had. But he develops this idea that he is part of this group, and he wants one of those jobs. He wants a French culture consularship, and he relentlessly pursues this at the White House. And even with James G. Blaine, I love that scene where, because he actually did do this. He met James G. Blaine somewhere. I think it was in the White House or on the White House grounds, asking for this. And James was like, "Get out of here! Stop asking for it. You're not going to get it." And at this point, he decides that he's got to get Chester A. Arthur as the president. He's got to kill James Garfield. He creates this delusion in his mind. And that brings us to the next topic, which is Jared Golden has decided not to seek re-election, saying recent incidents of political violence have made me reassess the frequent threats against me and my family. This is a principled leader who is concerned about political violence. As I mentioned, or we alluded to a minute ago, he is on that subcommittee with Maria Glueson-Camp-Perez. He's got principles. He's trying to reform the system like James Garfield was doing, but he's decided to call it quits because he wants to protect his family, I think, number one. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? Walter, let you go first.
Well, that's a tragedy, right? To be losing someone of principles, of talent, to fears of political violence. That's a big deal. I think that's a bigger deal than Marie Glueson-Camp-Perez, talking straight. It's like that's a very real thing for him to say. Yeah,
think
but
about
it's
this,
real.
though. You got to think that she probably gets it too, and she's still saying it.
Yes,
And
totally.
and I'm not trying to say anything. I mean, Jared's been in office for 12 years, right? Like, there's other reasons that he's leaving. This is not the only reason. The dysfunction, the he doesn't feel like he can get anything done. So I'm not trying to judge here, but I'm saying, like, she's probably getting it as well. Roger, thoughts?
Yeah, I read through the piece, and I had seen something before from him where he relates that last Thanksgiving, he and his family spent Thanksgiving in a hotel room due to death
Mm.
threats, right? And that stuck with me. That makes an impression. But as I sit and think about this, the threat of violence, particularly if you're standing up, uh, to in the past week, Marjorie Taylor Greene has started to moderate her position quite a lot, has broken with the president on a couple of things, and she's getting death threats, right? A lot
Yeah.
of death threats. I'm curious what thoughts the people in this group may have about I think it was 9 Republican House members who voted to impeach Trump during his first term,
Hmm.
and the campaign of retribution that was visited upon them, right? In the next election, most of them either failed to get reelected or chose not to run, that sort of thing. Very few of them
Yeah.
survived. So, standing up to your own side is all well and good, but wow, there's a huge risk, and it goes on all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laura?
I mean, I think about this a lot because I think about the question of like, what skills and competencies and traits are we attracting to Washington for public service? Right.
Mm.
And so a lot of what people in independent politics are trying to do is attract people into political participation who are not beholden to the two parties. Um, and I guess one strategy, right, that we're taking right now is people are begging and pleading with the two current parties to be different than what they are, right? And my approach is let's just vote them all out. Let's bring in new people. But it's really hard to get principled people to serve because the threat of political violence, right, is like that's in the con column, and for them the pro column is I'm going to serve my country, I'm going to try and make a difference, I'm going to do something that I believe is important and necessary, right? Those are the people who will exit first because there's not enough upside. If your upside is instead graft and power brokering and profiteering and a career in lobbying, then you're a lot more likely to go, well, I'll give it a shot. I'll see how bad those death threats really are. And, I talk to people often who are leaving public service and leaving political life. And the even people you've never heard of will tell you about really scary things that have been said to them when they break with their own party. And to me, this is one of the most serious threats we face because how are we going to attract serious people to public service when they're getting death threats?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I was, we have to create a better incentive structure
Hmm.
is kind of what you're talking about, right? And that is difficult based on the climate. And wanna get a quote here from James Garfield. So the Garfield, just to give some backstory, it's not really in the show, but Garfield, he lost his father when he was young. He was the youngest sibling. He was like really accident prone as a child, and he suffered a couple different accidents where he probably should have died, but miraculously he was okay. And I think that all of these different things, and he was a bookish kid in a world that wasn't very bookish because he was lower lower class, very they weren't very wealthy. They had labor class, and but he was an ambitious person. There's a quote here from him. Hold on. And I've mentioned this on the show a few times. We all shrink with horror from the effects of ambition, and some almost conclude that the thing itself is wrong. But it seems to me that it is necessary to success in every department of life. It is to the man what the fire is to the steam engine. It urges one to action. So let it burn. Restrain it only by the laws of God. And, as I mentioned many times on this show, I'm a big fan of James Madison. And he's got, the famous quote, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. And if we're looking at an incentive structure that encourages the worst among us to office, then what we need to do as individual citizens is we need to go find the ambitious, good people who are
Mm.
willing to be bold, to be daring, and make some real change. And I think it takes courage. I think it takes a lot of work, but I think it is the path that we need to go.
Since you mentioned some of the Garfield outside of his presidency, there was after the show, I did a little reading on Garfield, and there's two things about his life that struck me. They're insignificant in ways, but they just slapped me in the face. One is prior to becoming president, I think it was in 1876, he provided an original proof of the Pythagorean theorem.
Ah, yes.
Right
Yeah.
now, there's more than 350 of them. It's not a unique thing, but it's not nothing. To
Yeah.
come up with your own original proof of the Pythagorean theorem, that's indicative of a pretty sharp mind. The other thing that struck me, you were talking about he wasn't wealthy, and even after he was married, it was sort of itinerant lifestyle. He moved from here and there and did a lot of different jobs, including teaching. One of those teaching gigs was penmanship in a little town in Vermont, a post that had previously been held by Chester A. Arthur.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that
Garfield
one.
Garfield follows Arthur in the penmanship post. Arthur follows Garfield in the presidency. It
Hmm.
really is a small world.
Yeah, I think the other thing that really stands out with Garfield, and we mentioned it on the show last week, is his oratory skills. His ability to bring people to the table by giving a speech. This is where he really separated himself. I didn't flag the pages from there, but it's repeated over and over again in his early career. That's really what separated him from everybody else. That's what raised him up. And
That's how he got the nomination.
it's absolutely how he got the nomination, right? But it's how he even got to Chicago in the first place. It's how he got to the House of Representatives. It's how he got to his, he led a regiment in the Civil War, and it was
Mhm.
all because he could rally the troops, man. He could give a speech, and it's very unique based on his personality. He seems like a quiet, reserved, kind of passive guy, but when he got up to he spoke with such a fire. It sounds very impressive. Obviously, I've never been able to hear him speak.
Well, he he he
They
he,
didn't have
he
audio
attended seminary.
recording.
He was a minister.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh.
he was a minister and a very faithful
Yeah,
man. And
yeah.
I think that's kind of a key thing that we might be missing in right now is the fact that when things are really bad and there looks like there's no hope, there's few people in the world that can believe that things can be good. And taking it back to the show, there's those scenes with Chester A. Arthur. You mentioned how he was conflicted. And there's the one scene where Arthur comes into the office and he's like, "I resign. You've probably seen that I've been trashing you in the papers. Well, I'm
Hmm.
here to resign." And Garfield's like, "No, I'm going to give you another chance. I see something good in you. I Next time I believe you're going to come to me and you're going to tell me about it." And there was another scene where after they win the nomination of the Port of New York, his assistant comes in and he's like, "You did it. You outplayed him. You outplayed Conkling, sir. You've done it." And he's like, "This isn't a game. I didn't play a game. There was no maneuvering. I
Right.
just did what was right." And it takes a lot of courage and faith to do what's right and believe that you're going to come out on top. And I think, again, if you're an average citizen out there and you're looking to help, find those people. Find those people
Mhm.
who are bold. Find those people who can speak clearly and eloquently, and find those people that have faith that things are going to get better and help lift their voices up. Um, I'll let you guys chime in here. Been dominating. I'm sorry. I was really excited about the show.
I woke up this morning excited about the show.
Yeah,
Um,
we have to find people to run. I think that, Jeff, you were talking about the incentives to get people to run. I think incentives are sort of one lever that's available, but one of the other things you can think about is how do we support people once they're in office? And, financial support is great. Normal people probably don't have access to a lot of financial resources to make that support, but we could certainly support with moral support, right? Like we can say thank you to Marie Glusenkamp Perez for what she's doing. You can send her a note, send her an email. Um, if you're in Washington, you can go visit your members of Congress. If you're going to Washington, they will meet with you if you're from their district. And I think we need more people to recognize the importance of moral support that they can offer to elected officials.
No, I mean, I think that's great. I mean, encouragement is kind of a thing,
Mhm.
and then like we talked about it on our show. We talked about parenting a lot, right? With the kids that
Mhm.
are alt right, and sometimes the thing that you need to get your kid to do the right thing is just to encourage them to do it,
Mhm.
right? And I think Roger, was it you that brought up MTG Maria Taylor Greene and her change of heart lately? And there's people attacking
Well,
her on
her
X about it for various reasons, and it's like, look, I've disagreed with her strongly, but if she chooses, it's never too right. It's never, ever, ever too late to do the right thing. And if you choose to do the right thing, I will support you and I will
Mhm.
encourage you, hoping that you will continue to do more right things in the future.
So then the other side of the argument, though, maybe she's actually turning over a new leaf. Maybe she sees that MAGA has run its race. It's on the downslope. Trump's lame duck. It's all kind of falling apart, and she's going to get out before it drags her down. So
Maybe.
I I want to see a little longer runway here. I want to see what she does for the next 3 months before I'm willing to.
But
But
don't
I
you
mean,
think by giving her encouragement, you might extend that runway? You might give her confidence to go that direction?
I clicked on her tweet, man. What else do you want? Um, but yeah, but I saw a headline, an article or a headline that said, it was on Blue Sky or someplace. It said, "We've hated MTG for years, but now that she's come out against Republicans, she's had to hire security because she's getting death threats." I found that a pretty interesting observation.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I maybe you should write her a song, Roger. That would show some real support. Once we
Okay,
get through this trial period.
We
all
should
right.
get
Well,
MTG and
G-
MGP together in a
MGP.
room and
I
like
was noticing that. I was like, oh my gosh, what if they were the two co-sponsors? There you go.
yeah, let's get them
So
to co-sponsor Uncapping the House.
I mean,
well,
it's
there are plenty
possible.
of people in the House today they could turn to. Seth Moulton and Sean Casten and some others have been co-sponsors on bills in the past two Congresses.
Hmm.
So there are people who have put their name on resolutions. I shouldn't say bills. They were resolutions, which of course die in committee, but they put their names to something that had to do with increasing the size of the House. There are people in the House that we can, encourage.
Yeah. Well, and I think in all seriousness, every day as things kind of get less stable, the chance of uncapping the House increases, and I really do think it is the first step solution to the political violence situation. Right? People resort to violence when they feel like they don't have a voice being heard, and obviously there are other cases of mental instability or illness, but I think a lot of it comes down to like bad communication, right? Like even going back to this uh the lightning show, um death by lightning. It is absolutely the case that had somebody in the administration done a better job of speaking to this other human being, maybe Garfield wouldn't have been shot, right? And so yeah, I think that it really is getting people back to a spot where when they have a problem, they know exactly who they're going to call for that problem, which is their congressional office. If
Ghostbusters.
that is the instinct that I'm gonna call my congressional office, I'm gonna educate them about what's going on with me. I'm gonna figure out what's going on with them, and we're gonna educate each other and help each other. I mean that it is possible. I think it's probable, and it's absolutely what will solve the political violence epidemic that we are seeing taking hold of both sides of our political spectrums.
Anybody else want to jump in there? All right. So speaking of political violence, Tucker Carlson had a special on the kid. I'm not going to use his name, who attempted to assassinate Donald Trump. He said he, and this is Tucker Carlson at the beginning of this special that he run. He's talking about the assassination in this kid. He said this kid came within inches of destroying the country, and the FBI is hiding something. He says that the kid started out as a right winger but turned into a left winger, and the FBI is covering it up. It's a 30-minute special. There's a lot that goes into this. Um, I'll let Walter start here, because, this connects to Death by Lightning because this is a kid that tried to kill the president, right?
Yeah.
And that's what Charles Godot did. And Charles Godot, as I mentioned before, he was a loner. He was disconnected from society. He had delusions of grandeur, and he believed he was doing it for the stalwart faction. He believed that Chester A. Arthur was going to become president, and he was going to get lifted up, and he was going to finally get his job in the administration. I don't think that's specifically what this kid was thinking, but I'll let Walter go first.
Yeah. So we're talking about the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. So this is where Trump was shot in the ear. He got up and stands up and kind of famously yells, "Fight, fight, fight!" And so the interesting thing, I think, in part, is we don't know much about who that what person was. Right? He died immediately. He died on the roof. He was shot. But then, at least in my mind, like I had never had any follow up. Like I just, I didn't know what his story was. And this was kind of the first time I had seen somebody tell the story, and so it was free, so I watched it. And there's a lot of questions, right? And it's interesting because it's kind of like the same thing with the Epstein. Like, they're like demanding answers when he's not in office, and then he gets into office, and then all of a sudden there's still not any answers. And so I don't know. I don't really know what to make of that specific piece of political violence. To the extent that this guy was just corrupted by the situation. I'll just go back to, I think that if he had an opportunity to have his voice heard within the political machine, right, within the political game, which obviously he was politically motivated, right? Whatever took him onto that roof, it included politics. We have to make the president less important, right? That's the purpose of uncapping the House, right? Is to distribute the power so people feel heard, and also like it just the president matters, but it's not the existential crisis that is currently plaguing our country.
Well, so it's to that point, and the fact that Tucker Carlson says that he came within inches of destroying this country. I'm sorry, but we've had several presidents assassinated, and our country survived. Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, John F. Kennedy. Like Donald Trump getting assassinated does not destroy the country unless you are trying to create a narrative and you are trying to sell clicks and advertisement and make a profit. What Tucker Carlson is doing is not journalism. Okay, Tucker Carlson is profiteering. Okay, like plain and simple. Like you said, he had a lot of questions. It was all speculation. Why even put this special out with no, like, I understand they've got this new reporting and they found all this stuff, but like, what is the purpose of this? Roger, I'll let you answer that question.
Well, and that's the reason why I can't watch Tucker Carlson, because he does that kind of stuff all the time. He doesn't give any answers. The original prompt on this thing made reference to, and I did see this part in the bit that I watched. He talked about Vance going on the Turning Point show. He was the first one to guest host after Kirk was assassinated. And Tucker sees it as a missed opportunity to to try and establish some unity, try to reach out to bring people together. Instead, he went on his usual kind of thing. So, my question is, well, the reason Vance failed to show leadership in that moment is because Vance is not ready to be vice president. He wasn't ready when they plucked him out of obscurity. I don't. The only thing he brought to the table, as far as I can see, is financing from Silicon Valley. Right? He had a short tenure in the Senate. He had not done any government work before that. He's not ready for the job, and that's the reason why he's not displaying leadership in that moment. But then my other question is, you know, does this country at this point really want a unifier, or do they want a tribal chieftain?
Mhm.
Because it looks to me like everybody's trying to root for a tribal chieftain. If you try to do anything unifying, you're going to get punished for it.
Hmm.
Now, I agree this is an abysmal state of affairs, and it has to change, and maybe what we're doing is contributing in some way to making that change. But at this moment in time, do either base want a unifier? I mean, do the Democrats want to be unified with a person they see as a pedophile and a multiple convicted, all that jazz, right?
I
And
think people want
do the
stability. I think everyone wants stability, even if they don't want unity.
will they vote for stability?
I think they need the right leader. I think they need the right leaders, actually. Um, Laura, what do you think?
Um, I feel like I can't, it's hard for me to envision what a unifier would look like because so much meaning seems to come from party membership. And it's like, we have people in Washington with incredibly deep expertise on the policy challenges that we're confronting, and they can't get a hearing about their ideas because the only question anybody has is, what side are you from? I'm not going to listen to your ideas. I need to know which side you're from so I know if what you're saying is true or not, right? And so in an environment where nobody's bothering to understand the underlying argument about policy solutions, or the character of somebody running for office, where is the space to unify anybody? Because it's like, I even hear, I have an op-ed that I published a few weeks ago where we talked about the fact that political protest now, it inspires delight in the other side, right? So it's like, I actually enjoy seeing the other side upset or dismayed or outraged, right? And so it's like, or like, I know that those critiques aren't true of whatever the issue is because of who's saying them. And so, yeah, it's hard for me to imagine what unity could look like. I do think that independents, because there's such a large swath of the country, actually are one of the things that are like the best potential for unity, because they would actually pull the parties back towards the center. So if to me, when I look at like, what is our best opportunity for reuniting, getting things back on track, it's to say for both parties to come to the conclusion that they can't win elected office without speaking to the concerns of independents, right? And then it becomes sort of like a race to the middle to understand and respond to these voters. That's what gets them back on track. So I can imagine theoretically that a unifier is possible, but things are so polarized right now. It's a little hard for me to imagine the person that would be.
Roger, you looked like you wanted to chime in there.
Oh, no, not particularly. I mean, leadership is important. Having some skill is important. A lot of people made this noise about Donald Trump coming in. He's going to run it like a business.
Mhm.
Why?
It's
It's
not a
not a
business.
business. And even if he did run it like a business, he'd bankrupt it because that's what he does. Right? He doesn't. I would much rather have someone who's John Kasich. Right? At one point, he was, I guess, he was running in the primary. That's a Republican I might have voted for. Right? Because he's a fairly reasonable guy. But he's done it at the state level. He's done it in the executive. He's done it in the legislature. He's got a resume. I think it was Kasich and Hickenlooper from Colorado were going to run as the Johns or something. That would have been a dream ticket for me, right? Even if Kasich was the one who's going to be elected president, that's a Republican I might vote for, right? But there's so few of those, and he couldn't get any love. He couldn't get any
Mhm.
traction.
Laura, what did you think about the Tucker Carlson thing?
I had the same response you did to the thing that, like, immediately jumped out at me was the line about this would have destroyed the country because I was like, "Oh, well, would it really have?" Certainly it would have unleashed a lot of political chaos, and I don't want to see anybody, um, even under threat of harm for serving or seeking elected office in this country. The Tucker Carlson to me at this point, like, it's very hard for me to evaluate the quality of his journalism. And so I think this is kind of where we are as a country, right? Which is like there's so much data that's available to us. There's so much reporting and opinion and all of this stuff. And nobody can possibly be an expert in all of the stuff and be able to evaluate it competently. And so what we're left with is this a member of my in group or not? Right? Like am I team Tucker or no? And this I don't see how we can run a democracy in the complex economic, technological, environmental, cultural environment where we find ourselves if we're just going to say like, well, I trust whoever's on my side. That's how we've gotten Donald Trump. That's how we've gotten Tucker Carlson. That's how we had Joe Biden in serious cognitive decline at the end of his term, and Democrats just can't see it, right? Only the other
Tribal
side
chieftains.
can. Right.
Tribal
It's
chieftains.
it's just it's so tribal. I do think that the parties are reaching the end of their runway on tribalism, right? Like when nobody knows what reality is, I think people are going to send different elected officials to Washington.
And it's starting now with
Mhm.
Glusenkamp.
Um,
Yeah.
so I want to connect this to the Death by Lightning show, and Tucker Carlson was, he's throwing all these accusations at the FBI,
Mhm.
and they're lying, they're misleading. Why don't we know more about this guy? And I think the last scene in Death by Lightning is kind of, I think, the best reason why we don't know more about this guy. We shouldn't know more about this guy. Like there should be transparency. There should be a type of Warren Commission on this, like there was with the Kennedy assassination, so we can understand. But political assassinations typically follow the same path. It's typically a loner who is disconnected, who has these delusions of grandeur, right? Um, and the scene that I'm referring to in the show Death by Lightning was when, and I don't know if this is real. I don't know if this actually happened. I didn't get to fact check this first, but it is in the show. President Garfield's wife, Crete, goes and visits Godot before he is hung.
The morning of his,
And
yeah.
yeah, and she's basically like, "I'm gonna make sure you're erased. I'm gonna make sure nobody knows who you are. I hear you got a book you're trying to put out. I'm gonna make sure it's never published. Nobody's gonna know your name. Nobody's gonna ever know who you are. I'm gonna erase you the way you erased my husband. And there's not gonna be any name, streets named after you or any of that." And because Godot had this idea, even to the end, where he thought like he had done something great, and his name was he was gonna be famous. And for a lot of people, you know, that's the reason they do stuff like this. And I think with Tucker Carlson in the show is like, I don't understand the purpose of it, like, other than to try to, like, lift this guy's name up, to give this guy more attention, and when you do stuff like that, you're just, I don't know, giving other people with bad intention hope that they'll get attention too.
He's
You don't
Mhm.
making
have any
money
real
is what he's
substance.
doing.
Well, that's
He's
true,
making
he's
money.
definitely making money. Walter,
Yeah.
it looked like you wanted to chime in there.
Yeah, I think as Laura said, there's a lot of low quality, or there's almost all low quality data or there's so much data that it's all needs to be treated as being equally low quality at this point, because we've all been burned, even by our most trusted institutions, um, but especially by our legislators. And so I think if there was going to be an actual investigation into what happened here, it should be done in the House, but we don't have a House that's competent to do that. And so, to me, that's what this signifies. And I well, I don't judge people; I judge their specific actions. And Tucker has made some very bad choices. I don't think that he is. I don't think that he's all bad. I don't think that that would be an accurate statement, and I know that people repeatedly lie about him, and so I think that unless you actually consume what he says, mostly what you know about him is what other people say about him, which is kind of, I don't know, it's just funny, the way that works in today's environment. And so usually
Isn't
when
that
people
isn't
tell
that
me,
most things though? The
yeah,
most of what you know about somebody is what somebody else, like, everything I know about James Garfield comes from what somebody else said, right? So, like
well, okay, but that's not a living person. So I just try to make a point, especially if somebody's telling me I'm not allowed to listen to or read or consume information that is put out by a certain person. I just want the internet to know that drives Walter D. Clapp to do the opposite of that, essentially, right? I mean, and I think that's
Walter hasn't grown up yet. He's still Peter Pan. He's still rebellious.
who, me?
Yeah.
No, I mean, but I think that this is true for like all of the or many people in the middle are just, we don't know where to turn to learn something. There's not there we don't there are not clear paths towards truth anymore, and especially because of AI, which I know we'll get to at the end. Um, and so again, I mean, we have to uncap the House, because my representative should be able to give me the official story of what happened with the assassin who attempted to kill the president. Right? I should be able to get to some sense of finality and be able to trust that. And as you said, we don't have that now, so we can move on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think uncapping the House is the real solution here. I think it decentralizes power everywhere. You have less Tucker Carlson's grifting for money and attention, and you have more serious journalists trying to find answers, and they have better access to information because there's more representatives to speak with, right? And the representatives you mentioned, like, we don't have a competent House, but we have a House that's overwhelmed. They have too much work, and there's not enough of them. By simply having more of them, they actually might have the time to do the investigation properly, so we can get some actual answers. And before we move on to the next thing, I just want to put up some similarities here. You see over there, I've got the profiles of courage of John F. Kennedy, and I mentioned earlier when James Garfield was young, he had several instances where he had accidents where he probably should have died, falling into water, not even knowing how to swim, getting pulled up against something. And then he goes on, he becomes president. He's a magnetic, orator, and then he's assassinated. And it's very similar to John F. Kennedy in a way. John F. Kennedy wasn't supposed to be president either, just like Garfield wasn't supposed to be president. John F. Kennedy also had this miraculous situation when he was in World War II, where his PT boat was cut in half. He rescued people. He was stranded on an island for a little bit of time. He could have very easily died. His brother did die in World War II.
Malaria. Yeah, I think he got
Right.
malaria out of that incident.
And he goes on and he does this, I don't know if he was the same type of orator because I've never been able to hear Garfield speak, but he's described differently. Kennedy was more of a methodical speaker. He studied Lincoln, which again, Garfield studied Lincoln. His speech was modeled after Lincoln on the when he nominated Sherman. And then he's able to get the country through this very difficult time in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then he goes on and he's assassinated, right? So there's a lot of parallels there between these two men who were assassinated. So I just find it interesting, and I just wanted to share it before we moved on. Okay, so Ben Shapiro, everybody knows who Ben Shapiro is, right? He has suggested that if the cost of living is too expensive in New York because of various reasons, I think they were talking about the new Democratic Socialist mayor, um, Mamdani, people should just move. Do you guys think that is a solution to a problem? Should people just move? Now he makes the point, like in America, we move a lot and we have moved a lot. It is the land of opportunity, and if there isn't opportunity for you where you are, then go west, young man, go west. Do you think that that's still a thing? And Laura, I'll let you go first.
Well, yes, I think for certain socioeconomic classes, mobility is extremely high. With virtual work, right? It's also increased. I would argue it's probably a little too high. I think that I think we need deep roots. We need community to for self-governance to work. And that
Right.
when the cost of exit is too low, it actually makes people kind of like uh, plan to leave instead of looking for ways to stay. And I think that that feeling of that propensity towards exit, we're actually seeing it in not just communities, but like individual relationships. Um, you know, yes, I think Americans maybe even have some cultural DNA that says, just, continue west, look for greener pastures. And like that, voting with your feet, I guess I can't disagree with that, right? Like that is I think one of the only corrective paths most people have when they dislike the circumstances where they find themselves. It'll be interesting to see if that's what materializes in New York. And I'm curious, I don't know if you guys have looked at any numbers, but are people actually leaving the country as they threatened that they would do with Trump being elected?
I'm not sure on that. Do you have the numbers on that?
I see
I don't know.
anecdotal evidence, a little bit of stories here and there, but I haven't seen any substantive, like wave type numbers.
Mhm.
And
What
so
do you
I
th-
saw something, somebody claims to have done an analysis on New York City millionaires, and there was some point in the past where some catastrophic Bloomberg got whoever got elected, and everybody said, "Oh, the millionaires are leaving. They're all going to leave New York." And now there's 50% more millionaires than there were at the time. So
Mhm.
I don't buy it. It's bullshit. The millionaires aren't leaving New York.
what about everybody else? Do you think that Shapiro's right? If he's specifically talking about the cost of living here, I think. But like let's apply this to anything. Like where I live, right? All this land's been sold to data centers. Should people just give up and move away, or should they stay in the homes that they built and participate in the system and push back on the things that are changing that they don't like?
So I'll play the devil's advocate because it seems like you are firm on staying put and fighting, Jeff. I'm just reading between the lines here.
Mhm.
I haven't given my opinion yet.
I know, but I
Yes,
already
you have.
know.
I get the same vibe too. I get the same vibe.
You asked that
You're not a good
question in
poker
such a
player.
way. um, Ilya Soman is a think tanker in DC who I've had the pleasure of meeting, and he's written a couple books about um, this idea of voting with your feet, right? That one of the most effective votes a person can make is by voting with their feet. If you don't like it, in the local place where you are, get up and leave. And
Mhm.
that's his whole shtick. And I think there's something to that. Um, and I think there's something to that in the American spirit. I certainly um, can trace in my own lineage, people making moves, specific moves, and in my own life, in order to have a more favorable system or set of laws with which you're fighting. And so one example that I deal with as a lawyer is like, man, if you live in a city that's in a county that's heavily taxed, and you also have an HOA, you then are dealing with like 5 layers of bureaucracy. And there's no like, you're not going to like, magically make that work well, right? It's always going to be a giant headache. I think it's always going to be just, at least 1 or 2 too many layers of, people deciding to tell you what color paint your house can be. And, so in that situation, I would say, absolutely get out of there, dear client. Move, go, you can go down the street, you can go across town, you can move towns. But, I do think that there's tremendous power if you have the money. And which actually brings me to something that I've been thinking a lot about, because, one of the other things that we now see, right, is that the Supreme Court has put these very big moral questions, like abortion, back into the states. And so it brings up this question, right? It's like, well, we have people who can't move between the states very easily. And so I do think that it would probably be a very good idea for the U.S. Congress to pass an amendment to the tax code, or to create a specific program to basically fund people who want to leave a state. Right? I think that would be a stopgap measure to ensure that people are getting the health care that they need in the state that they want to, without kind of a top-down solution, but a more of a bottom-up solution, allowing people to vote with their feet, and say, I don't want to live in this state that's making these backward decisions. I'm going to go somewhere else. And so then that state loses that person and that tax base. So it would actually allow us to more quickly see how people are responding to different policy decisions that are being made at the state level, if you will. And so on that front, I think I can kind of get with Ilya, but I think it only makes sense if you're giving people like a moving stipend, right? If you want to move from Alabama to California, the federal government chips in X number of dollars, or takes it off your taxes depending on your tax bracket.
Roger?
Hmm. Yeah, and you've heard me mention it before, but my favorite punching bag is North Carolina, because that's where I live, right? So, what are my options for driving change in North Carolina, right? One party represents me at the state legislature, House and Senate. The same party represents me in the U.S. Congress, the House and the Senate. And crucially, there's a law in the books from 1917 that prohibits citizen-driven ballot referenda in North Carolina.
Mm.
What are my options to have my voice heard? One of the only ones is to pick up and move. Take my earnings and my tax revenue with me to some other state. So the states, North Carolina specifically in this case, but states don't necessarily make it easy for people to stay and fight. They, in a lot of cases, make it as difficult as possible, particularly in North Carolina. We're a 50-50 state, but we've got a gerrymandered supermajority in the legislature. It's just nuts.
Yeah.
So this means you need to run as a local caucus member or delegate in your party, or maybe Laura will convince you to run as an independent.
Yeah, I can introduce you to some people.
I'll go to all my campaign events without a hat and say I'm the no cap man. The no cap man.
I like it. So I think your idea there, Walter, is interesting. However, I can't comprehend having Congress pay people to move. Like federal
Yeah.
tax dollars paying individuals to move when we're so many trillions of dollars in debt already just sounds like, I don't know. Like I don't see how that works.
Oh,
However,
it definitely, you would way pay for itself in the economic benefits.
that's what everybody says about every program ever. Is like it'll pay for itself.
No. I mean,
Pay the debt down for crying out loud.
People do say that too often. I think this actually. So Ilya Soman in particular, I think, would make a very cogent case backed by numbers that actually is more likely to be true than not.
So, but back to the Ben Shapiro thing. I think it's both. I mean, I think I don't think there's anything. I mean, he's right. In America, people move for different reasons, for opportunity, right? But you know what? You know what? Also, people do in America. They create opportunity. They stand up to problems and they resolve them. I think both of these things is what makes America great. And I think we need people who understand this and push us to do this thing because if everybody chooses if everybody chooses to stand and fight, then you just have a fight. If everybody chooses to run away, then your problems are just going to follow you. At some point, you have to have people with different skills and talents and opportunities do what's best for themselves and solve problems. Eventually, you're going to turn a blue city red, and eventually, you're going to turn a rural area blue. It's going to happen. And you got to find the right people. It's back to what we've been talking about all along. You got to find leaders. We need more
Mhm.
leaders in America. We need more opportunities for leadership in America. That's what we're trying to do here. That's why we want to uncap the House. We got to create that. We got to stand up and even if people aren't listening to us, we got to speak and we got to speak together and we got to speak with one voice, and that's how we get our voice heard.
Well, but how do you square that? I mean, this idea that average Americans are problem solvers and you can take things bull by the horns and with this other concept of learned helplessness of the American public that we've discussed at great length
Right.
in our show. I mean, there are some people that fit both of those, right? But there's a lot fewer that fit the movers and shakers, the go-getters. There's a lot fewer of those than there is the learned helplessness bunch, in my opinion. So
So
I'm interested in how you square those comments.
I think most people in America are capable of learning and solving problems on their own, but they don't necessarily believe it. And that's why you have to have a set of leaders to inspire them that they can solve this. They break the glass ceiling of learned helplessness, and then you unleash the expertise of America. You know how many dads on their weekend learn how to be barbecue experts simply by watching YouTube videos? You know how many moms learn how to, crochet or bake bread simply by looking up recipes online and learning on their own? We are excellent at learning things that we want to learn when we want to learn them. We have so much ambition inside of us and we have so much opportunity at our fingertips. We just need people out there to encourage us to go out and do the thing.
Well,
And yet they're not
and
using
again,
YouTube to learn how to government.
but Roger,
Wait,
if we uncap the House, I think that those people are going to learn how helpful they can be again.
If I agree, but if ifs and buts were
When.
candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. So
Laura?
I think that I think people would like to be more involved in government and take steps to have their voices heard, push back against some of the abuses we're seeing right now. Government is arranged to avoid that feedback. And the two parties have gotten more and more effective at cutting off the lines of communication that would make them need to adjust their behavior. So I think like, yes, we're seeing learned helplessness among the electorate, but that's engineered. It's not the natural state of human beings. And I think that like, my preference would be like we shouldn't be subsidizing relocation because that's a larger system that's at work, right? Is like we want people to relocate when they feel that the balance of pros and cons is out of whack. Like that, we want them to move. We don't want to encourage it too much, right? Or discourage it either. We don't want people to be stuck because we need the larger system to be in stasis. I think the parties have engineered a complete inability to voice dissent for so long. They have kept the system out of equilibrium for so long that we're headed for a correction. Sooner or later, the system will find, water seeks its level. That's where we're headed because they've managed to avoid the consequences of their behavior for so long. I think it's going to look like a big independent movement. I think it's going to look like a lot of instability and political volatility until that happens.
What can you put a little bit of meat on the bones of what you imagine a big independent movement looking like?
Well, so right now, 43% of Americans say that they're political independents. And so, know I get a lot of questions from people who say, "Oh, well, they say that, but they don't vote independent." And my answer is, "Oh, they absolutely do. What they do is swing vote and split ticket vote. And those are the forces that we need for accountability in government, because people voting for their own party, that doesn't create accountability, right? When your side can do no wrong, that's not how we get accountability that leads to effectiveness in government. So we need independents to keep swing voting, right? Like the parties like to call them fickle, but these are just voters with boundaries. And when you cross them, they will go elsewhere. And that's exactly what elected officials need to know. That's the message they're not getting right now.
Yeah.
But when they start getting a real threat, which is deliver on campaign promises or we're out, I think that's what's going to reshape their behavior. I do think in some districts, we're going to start to see independent candidates, more and more independent candidates, and independents being viable for statewide office. So, like, I wouldn't say the answer is to go out and run an independent for president in 28. But the folks I work with, the strategy is to elect enough members, enough independent members to the House to deny both parties a majority.
Mhm.
And we think that that would actually make a big difference in how Washington functions, which is not a high bar right now, right? Like things are really not functional.
Well,
But
and you'd only
but
need like 5 reps, right?
exactly.
Well, so
Exactly.
but you can do that within the parties too, and it actually would be easier to do that within the parties if you had principled people. And see, here's the key. Here's the key, though. Like
You're
you
gonna
can't
sneak
just
them
run
in?
independents, and you just can't run on anything. Like you have to actually have a leader, have a candidate who's a viable winner, regardless of where they line up, which party, independent, Republican, or Democrat. And that candidate has to have a plan to pitch to the people. If you
Mhm.
don't have the candidate and the plan, then you got nothing, right? Like we're stuck in the same place that we are. And the reality is if you can win your primary in the Republican or Democratic primary with a message that is bipartisan, and you can run them in a state that has an open primary, you can do the same, you can accomplish the same goal, but you're doing it within the party. So what you'll do is you'll force the parties to become more moderate. You'll force the parties to have to put money into people that maybe disagree with their policies. And you actually have a more successful possibility of winning us, winning the office if you function within the party. That is the method. I mentioned the Reagan Caucus podcast. That's the method that Thomas House has gone, is like, and you mentioned it earlier, is like we got to have people that stand up and put boundaries on their own party. It had the reform almost has to come from within. You know, when we were talking about on the alt right podcast, at the end I quoted Viktor Frankl, and it's like when you can no longer change your circumstances, you have to change yourself, right? And we
Mhm.
need to look within. We have to start changing ourselves. We need to elect people within the party, outside of the party, but they have to have a plan, and we got to have leaders to do it.
How many
Point of order,
independents do
Mr.
we have right
Chairman.
now in Congress? Is there one in the House?
There is, I believe, one in the Senate and one or two in the House.
You're talking about an
Okay.
independent? Is
Yeah.
Angus King one of them?
Angus
Was in the
King and
Yes.
Sanders are independent, so there's 2 in the U.S.
Right.
Senate.
So Sanders
Yeah.
is, I think, like a little bit of a, I don't know how to classify Sanders. I realize he has an I after his name, but
Yeah.
that's the thing about being an independent, right? Is that like there's no party structure, there is no litmus test. And so I
Yeah.
think it makes it hard to keep a lid on if what you're interested in doing is creating a political party, right? But like what we're talking about is not a party. We're talking about a movement of independent voters. And I just think there's no legitimate argument to be made against enfranchising these voters. And they can tell you if they want moderate Dems or Republicans, or they want somebody who's free of a party. Sorry, Roger.
No, just point of order. We're at the 79-minute mark, and we haven't talked about AI yet, so I just want to put
Oh.
that out there. The CPA is the timekeeper, the scorekeeper.
All right. Well, no time like the present. So in a 60-minute piece this weekend. It was reported that Anthropic's AI models resorted to blackmail to avoid being shut down. Did you guys see this? Um, so it was very interesting. They were testing it, and they set it up to see what would happen. And it read emails where there was an affair going on, and it read emails where they were supposed to shut down the AI. And the AI decided to blackmail this fictional employee who was having this affair, and saying if you don't stop the shutdown, I'm going to ruin your life. Kind of scary, isn't it?
What's the surprise? That's consistent with human nature.
And humans
I'm not
made
surprised
AI.
at all. I'm not surprised at all. It's trained on large language models. It's trained on human behavior, human history. I'm not surprised it resorted to that.
Hmm. Well, what do we do about it?
Yeah,
Kill it.
I was thinking about this, about you and your fences, how much you were talking about fences last episode. And we need to have good fences, and it's funny because out here in the West, and back in Texas, we had the saying that good fences make good neighbors. Um, but my grandfather he was really not a fan of fences. He thought, you don't want a fence that's opaque. You really want to be able to see through the fence so
Mhm.
you and your neighbor can still be neighborly. Um, and I once again, like, we already have laws on the books, I think, to cover any action that an AI might take, right? Like, insofar as a AI makes human-like actions that are negative, then I think the creator of that device is going to be liable in the same way that the creator of another product that causes harm to a person is liable.
Nah, he'll be
And
pardoned.
I mean, I'm sure they have all sorts of click-through agreements. I've also heard a lot of reports about these models like trying to convince kids like commit suicide, which is super dark. And I think if that's true, um, I think that we'll see lawsuits, and you'll see the companies get punished, and they're gonna try very hard to ensure that the behavior that actually causes harm does not get propagated. Um, so going back to fences, I don't think there's there aren't really legal fences that you can draw around code. I get is part of the problem. You can, but somebody else like, you can't really contain electrons with law, right? We can kind of control the way humans use electrons, except for when the technology is so ubiquitous that anyone can have it. Then it's it would be kind of like trying to regulate like what sort of math that you're allowed to do in your house. Right? It's like, well, like, I don't know, like, how would you police that, right? And so especially as we see these models coming offline onto people's personal computers and stuff, um, I just don't. There's not a regulatory framework that fixes this other than uncapping the house, right? The solution to all of the AI problems, it is, I think, federal representatives are at the sovereign defense level, who have an AI model that is trained on the Library of Congress. Each Congress member has their own weights and measures that they can manipulate. That model is provided to constituents. Constituents can fact check other constituents' models, as well as uh, change the weights and measures for their own version. And um, only in that kind of um, that cluster, that symphony of versions of reality, essentially, are we going to get towards something like a consensus reality again, across the political spectrum, and even within it. And I think the only other alternative is going to be like a top-down 1984 totalitarian state, and that's what's in China. That's what China's going to be. And there's certainly people in the U.S. that would like to see the U.S. made in the same image, and that's why uncapping the house is so important at this moment. I mean, things like this are scary, but I think what is much more worrisome, or what Americans should be worried about, is um, large large corporations contracting with governments, state, local, federal, to analyze pre-crime and arrest you before you actually commit a crime. Right? I mean, the types of invasions of privacy that are being before there was like this big argument during the Patriot Act. It's like, well, we're not really looking at all of it. And it's like, well, actually, we are, right? And because we have this tooling, all of this data is available at our fingertips. And while it's again maybe efficient, I don't think that it is necessarily a long-term security, right? Like Jeff, you always say, the centralized kind of top-down things always seem to fall apart. And you can fool some of the people sometime, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And so we have to find ways to build ground up truth in America, and I think this is our opportunity. And there's just a confluence of forces that kind of seem to make it inevitable. Um, but we'll see.
Laura?
Um, what remind me of the question? I'm sorry. I was surprised that the answer is to uncap the house. I was like, wow, you guys bring it back every single time. Like this is
Message discipline.
incredible.
Message discipline. We're all in
Yes,
training to run for
I
Congress.
So what do we
there you
do
go.
about AI?
Oh, what do we do
You
about
know, what do
AI?
we do
Oh,
about
that's an
AI?
easy
This
one.
okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish the
No, no, it's
question.
no, that's it. You've got this AI model out there that's blackmailing people. You've got this potential of this great technology being turned into a weapon, or turning itself into a weapon. What
Yeah.
do we do as a people to protect ourselves?
I mean, I'm not an AI expert, and I don't have a good answer. My only this is my observation as an expert in human social cognition, which is how we understand other people. We tend to force everything into a human shaped mold, which is why we treat our pets like they're human beings. We think about our car like it's a human being, and
Yep.
we very readily think about technology like human beings. There's no reason to believe that AI is human like. The technology that it's using to operate is probabilistic, associational, that it's not a full accounting of how human brains work. And there's some really significant gaps in our modeling of how human brains work. So I think like our tendency to understand AI in human-like terms and to talk about it like, oh, it lied. Can you trust it? Right? Like to me, that's like where we need to be a lot more self-aware when we're talking in those terms, because those are metaphors that may or may not apply. And my concern is that we are like vastly overestimating the extent to which we can control or understand AI by using this human-like metaphor. And in the end, the reason we humanize things, including like this this cat who wants to be on your
Hmm.
podcast. So like the reason we humanize things is because it gives us a sense that we understand and control them. And my concern with AI is that when we're talking about like, can we trust it? Can we control it? We're thinking about it like it's a person. We need to stop. It's not. It's not a
Yeah,
person. We
that's
have to change even the language.
yeah, that's
So
part of
So,
human nature. It's been going on forever.
mhm,
The poetic device personification. That is
mhm.
precisely what
Yeah.
you're mentioning here. Is the poetic device from 200 years ago. Wordsworth and Keats were using it.
Oh, it's probably dates to, like, the very beginning
Oh yeah,
of
Homer,
human, language, but, I
Gilgamesh.
think this is an instance where we could really, like, get off get, you know, miss some threats that we ought to be aware of.
That's a
yeah.
great point. I hadn't thought of it in that way.
So James Pethokouskas kind of mentioned that last week, is like because I don't know if he's an AI expert, but he studies a lot of technology, and he mentioned that idea that we tend to humanize things. We tend to think that
Mhm.
they're human. What I'll say is, one of the most transformative inventions of the 19th century was barbed wire. I'm just gonna put it out there.
Mhm.
And like, and we mentioned last week there was a bill in Ohio that wanted to ban the idea of personhood for AI. I think that's
Mhm.
when Pethakukas brought up, like, yeah, people are going to try to give it personhood because people are going to think that it's human because we think everything
Hmm.
is human. And I think drawing some boundaries, making sure we understand that it's not human, making sure our laws represent the fact that it's not human. I think these are probably good things. And I think that the most successful way of getting that done is through an uncapped house because you're going to have regular people in that and not a small group that can be easily swayed by a tech lobby. So, I get where you're saying, Laura. It's like, how did we get from AI to uncapping the house? And
Bravo.
I'm with Walter here. Like he's right. Like you've got to have an uncapped house if you're going to pass and create some real good boundaries for this. You're on mute.
Unanimous consent.
All right. We successfully got AI into the show. Walter will not fire me. Awesome. All right. So thank you, Laura, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. We'll go around final words for the crew. Roger, Walter, Laura, who wants to go first?
Well,
I will. I'll start. I'll start it off. And thank you, Laura, so much for being here. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to seeing how the independent faction plays into 2026 and 2028. And let's stay in touch because I think fundamentally, uncapping the house is it's an idea that every independent should know about. Um, I'll just leave it there. Folks, please go to the website here, www.y435.org. Go read the Declaration of Representation. Sign it if you agree. Laura, that's your homework between now and the next time we all chat. Um, and yeah, thanks to everyone for listening. And Jeff, thank you for as always, for putting together such a great program.
Roger?
Oh, me now. I want to thank Laura for joining us and your cat. What's the cat's name?
this is Dart.
Thank you, Dart, for joining us. That was fun watching his tail go back and forth
I
a few
know
times.
that's not my deal.
Um, so I'll try and I'll end on sort of my normal thing. I like to draw these shocking distinctions between the current situation and 100 years ago when this whole thing started. And today I'll say that the last time the U.S. House was expanded was 15 years before the carving on Mount Rushmore would even begin.
Mm.
Wow.
That's how long it's been since we expanded the House. A century.
Laura, final words, and be sure to mention where people can follow you. You've got a Substack as well, so make sure you share that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a fantastic conversation. And I think that maybe the answer is uncapping the house and seating a whole lot of independence. But uh yeah, so I let's see, where can you find me? I have a Substack called How to Human, which is about basically how humans think about things, how they relate to each other. I talk a lot about social psychology, but also how we govern each of them ourselves. And I also talk about similar things on my podcast. We made this political with Lauren Hall. Um, and where Jeff was kind enough to join us earlier this year. But yeah, at the Independent Center, which is www.independencenter.org, this is where we're working on engaging people who feel like they're politically homeless. So if that sounds like you, come check us out. And yeah, it's always exciting to meet people who are so passionate about a reform and what this country could be like and how we could govern ourselves better. It's just really heartening.
Well, thank you again for coming on the show. And independence, we're a bipartisan organization, which means that we support Republicans, we support Democrats, and we support independents who want to uncap the House. And we have a plan. We have an actionable plan to get this done. We have to create a movement that incentivizes the best of us to rise with ambition and solve problems. If you'd like to help, you can go to our website, www.y435.org. You can sign our declaration, you can make a donation, and you can sign up to help. Again, this is an important issue. I know that it may sound strange, but America was founded on representation. We fought a civil war over expanding representation, and every significant government battle in history, the answer has always been a more representative government. This is the natural way of things, and it's just time. Like Laura mentioned earlier, we're at a moment where there's going to be a reset. The water level has reached a level where it has to move. So now is the time. Join us. Peace, love, and
And
representation.
representation.
Thank you for tuning in to the Representation Station. Don't forget to visit our website at www.y435.org and sign the Declaration for Representation. And don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on X at NoCapFund, on Facebook, NoCapFund, on YouTube at Uncap the House, and on Instagram at NoCapFund. Thank you, and don't forget, peace, love, and representation.